I think Civil War is one of the coolest comic book series to ever happen in Marvel's history. Having the government pull apart these superheroes, metahumans, mutants, and making them choose sides, ruining relationships and friendships. It's such a great idea, and it's written so well. I've always wanted to see something like that happen for the DC universe. And some people would even say that perhaps a Civil War would simply not be possible for the DC universe, and I definitely understand where that argument would come from, because I don't think there are enough characters that have government backing in the first place to allow for a Civil War to exist. However, that has never stopped me for thinking about a DC Civil War, and I will also say that in my perfect DC universe storytelling, a Civil War does actually happen in my world. Now, one day, maybe when this channel is a little bit bigger, I would love to go through my perfect interpretation of how a DC universe would be molded and what particular stories would take place in this world. But because a DC Civil War has been on my mind lately, I'm going to give you a very particular story on how I would make it work in my DC universe. Someone also did leave a comment recently on a video about making a video on if DC Civil War were to happen, who would be on what side. And maybe if this video does well enough, I will make that video describing which characters would take which side and why. So my Civil War inspired story for DC picks up about 10 to 15 years after the major superheroes like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman have first begun crime fighting. All the major characters, or the characters who have been around the Justice League, are all around their mid-30s to their early 40s. The state of the world at this very moment is very bleak. They are just coming off of a worldwide battle against Darkseid, in which Darkseid has left this planet bloodied and battered. There are cities and countries all over the world that have been completely decimated. There are many heroes who have died in this process. And let's just hypothetically say the planet 15 years from now has 10 billion people living on it. This war with Darkseid results in at least a quarter of their population lost. Every single person, not just superhero, regular civilians, even certain villains. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is emotional. Everyone has lost loved ones. Everyone is suffering from some major PTSD. With the entire world not the same as it was before Darkseid, and with a lot of power in a lot of different countries and continents waiting to be scooped up by particular people who are willing to utilize this power, Lex Luthor decides to run for president of the United States. The question would always be, how would Lex Luthor be allowed to run for president after all the things he has done with his time against Superman? All the evil he may have done, all the unethical operations that he may have ordered his company to do, threatening civilians in Metropolis just to get to Superman. How are we letting this man run for president? And we currently find ourselves in a situation where, like I said, the world is suffering so much that they will take whoever they can to right this ship. Lex Luthor, not only being a genius, but being prideful and arrogant, he would of course take this upon himself to be able to mold a new America in his vision, and even be able to bring the rest of the world underneath his wing so that he could lead multiple nations. Desperation is a very powerful state to find yourself in, and when the world is desperate, if they have to rely on Lex Luthor, they will. Lex would say all the right things, everything a presidential candidate would have to say to hopefully come into power. He's doing it, he's saying it, he's acting on it. Also, however, in my story prior, Lex will actually have been one one of the biggest players in helping take Darkseid down, so he has definitely earned a little more leeway when it comes to superheroes. Even for the characters who know him well and know his motivations, someone like Superman and Batman, they can't even deny that he is speaking for things that the people of America and maybe even the world would want to hear. This is where the Registration Act comes into effect. Lex Luthor can finally take his opportunity to show the world why he dislikes Superman so much. And he essentially says that the minute that people like Superman started to come around, our pale blue dot in the middle of the universe, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of other civilizations who are probably more technologically advanced than we are. So many powerful beings decided to bother us because they realized that we housed people such as Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and Flash, Martian Manhunter. The list goes on. Because we've decided to take in such powerful people who perhaps don't belong on this planet, we have allowed even stronger threats outside in the universe to continue to threaten the rest of our population and our civilization. Without superheroes having any communication or any connection with the government, they have been allowed to take the fight and take the battle anywhere they want around the world. They've been able to fight these villains in cities, in populated areas, and look what it has done to our civilization over the years. If Superman was not somebody who lived on Earth, we might never have had to deal with Darkseid or any of the other threats. And since we've had to deal with Darkseid, is there someone or something out there who is on his level of power or even more powerful? We need to start being cautious. Obviously, the people of the world will sit there and say, yeah, no, for sure, this is absolutely right. We need to keep control of these superheroes. People of such power cannot be held unchecked. But the people who know Lex Luthor, who have dealt with Lex Luthor, they will understand that this is a power grab and he has an ulterior motive. Then he continues to say, which pretty much seals the deal of his candidacy. If he is elected president, he will officially put into place the Registration Act of superheroes and metahumans. So you might think to yourself, realistically, because superheroes in the DC universe, not many of them have governmental backings, who is he truly going to be getting to sign this Registration Act? Sure, he might be able to utilize some of these Suicide Squad, anti-villain, anti-hero characters. He might even get other heroes or meta-human characters out in the world who are desperate and need this. But none of the big-time players will actually join this cause. Luthor is standing on this assumption that Superman will join his Registration Act, and you think to yourself, why in the world would Superman do this? And here's my idea. At this point in time, Superman would have a girlfriend, maybe a wife, and he would have a child. Boy or girl, doesn't matter. And no, it is not Lois Lane. It would be somebody else. Superpowered or not, I'm not too sure. Those details have not been ironed out. No matter what, this child will have the abilities of Superman. What would happen is right underneath of Superman, Lex Luthor would kidnap and capture his wife or girlfriend and his child. He would place them in a facility that Superman would never be able to find, and also the fact that it is lined with lead, so he wouldn't be able to see it through walls. And the containment that he has placed, at the very least, his child in, is lined with red sun energy, and as a backup, there is even kryptonite. Essentially, he says to Superman, you must sign the Registration Act, you must on live television and anything that results in the media act as my right-hand man and always be behind my shoulder, and you must always be optimistic of the registration's future. You can never look like you dislike this opportunity, and you can never speak out against this policy. If you do not keep up this facade, if you do not support the Registration Act to your full capacity at all times, if I even see a shred of failure in you, I will kill your child and your wife/girlfriend. So Superman is in a situation where he has to do this no matter how much he does not want to. And the biggest reason why Lex would go down this route is because Superman is the golden boy. If the rest of the world saw that Superman was joining a registration act and talking it up on live television about how much of a great idea this is and how much it is needed for the preservation of humanity, all other superheroes, or at least a huge chunk of them, would join them because Superman did so. This would, of course, leave a lot of characters thinking to themselves, what the hell is going on? The majority of the Justice League who fights alongside him, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and so on. The Superman family would be in complete shock, and what would be interesting is to see what other members of the Superman family would join the Registration Act, growing Luthor's power tenfold. Obviously, Batman would know Luthor is up to something very shady, even if it is simply to solidify his power over the entire world. Batman seems to always be thinking 10 steps ahead. So why is he not capable of realizing nearly off the bat why Superman would be joining this Registration Act? And the biggest reason would be is because once again, the world is not okay. And I think everybody has become very quick to judgment. So much bad has happened to the world in the past couple of years that even more bad continues to happen with this Registration Act, which gets everyone emotional. Batman sits here and thinks to himself, my best friend, no, screw it, my brother is joining Lex Luthor. What the hell is going on? This is where characters would have to decide, and there are three options. You either join Lex Luthor, don't join and retire being a superhero, or you don't join and basically become a rebel. And as if Superman was not enough to sign the registration, you have a ton of other reasons on why superheroes would join up. Perhaps there are heroes and metahumans who would actually feel like this is the best route to go, and we do need governmental control over us to keep us in check. Being part of this Registration Act, I imagine Lex Luthor would implement some sort of salary figure, especially for those heroes and metahumans after the Great War against Darkseid who perhaps don't have any money to their name. They've lost everything. They might not even have a home. They will join this program so they can get payment of some sort. Why not utilize your powers and get paid for it? I also do imagine that at this point there would be a big sprout of a bunch of new and younger heroes and metahumans who would enter the picture because they are a little more gullible, because they might think differently than our previous generation's heroes. They will be immediate to trust Lex Luthor and to join this Registration Act. You could only imagine the ripple effect that would stem from this situation. The arguments and the fighting between ones who used to be friends with one another. The disagreements, the anger, the betrayal of trust. Lex Luthor is successfully pulling the superhero community apart. I could only imagine Lex would also abolish all of the super leagues around the world. Anything that has justice or league in the title has been completely disbanded. He would want all eyes on every movement of these superheroes and these metahumans, so he could dictate exactly what he would want done with them and when for them to actually act on a situation. And especially the Watchtower, that would be one of the first areas he would go to and one of the first places he would claim his dominion over, which at that point, his claim over the law of superheroes hasn't just begun, it has now become far more serious. And of course, as you would imagine, this would be Superman as the head of the Registration Act with Batman as the head of the rebellion, if that's what you want to call them. Even though realistically it is actually Lex Luthor controlling Superman like a puppet. There could even be situations where superheroes and metahumans who sign the Registration Act, when they're around Superman or they see Superman, sometimes they can kind of tell he's a little off and maybe his head is not always in the game. And it's lucky for him that Lex Luthor isn't around to see that, because if he did, his family would be in jeopardy. But nobody knows his family is in jeopardy, because if he says anything, that is still a threat to his family. Or maybe there's a group of people who think Batman is a complete fool. Why wouldn't he want to join the government? Why wouldn't he want to keep the planet a safer place with rules and with guidance? And obviously, one of the most interesting things to come from this story is who joins who. What side do these characters fall on? There are definitely characters as well who wouldn't even reside on Earth anymore after something like this happening. It would be easier for them to leave. Someone like Green Lantern, perhaps. And a big chunk of this story would be, of course, for Lex Luthor to truly become the god he has always wanted to be. Not just for America, but for his power to grow worldwide. And to be able to say that my dominion is Earth. I own it all. I am in control. It is, however, also to be able to say that a human who has been able to grow to this type of power has been able to defeat Superman without actually having to kill him. And of course, I do think that threats and blackmail would eventually hit its tipping point where it doesn't work on Superman anymore. So Lex would obviously come up with other ways and other motives to keep Superman in line. And they will only get worse and worse and more dangerous. So there is my idea and the details behind DC Civil War. However, this story is a lot bigger than this video alone, and there's obviously so many details I didn't get into, and even details that I haven't figured out myself yet. But if you guys liked this idea and liked this story, let me know. I could make a part 2 in a way where I discuss which characters would take which side. But with that being said, leave in the comments below what you thought of this story and what other ideas or details you think could belong in a DC Civil War. However, that is all I have for you on this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and until the next time, I will talk to you all very soon.